We will try, councillors and Mayor, to get through part of item 10. At this stage, I really must apologise for the sort of constant attempt to hurry people up. We've actually got way more on our program today than we should have, but that's really beyond our control. So I'm certainly appreciating the cooperation of councillors in trying to, expedite matters. And to that extent, we will break up our presentation on the interim update on the Auckland floods and infrastructure impacts. We've got Craig McElroy, General Manager of Healthy Waters, and Andrew Chin, the Executive Director of Special Project from Watercare, who are going to present to start off with, and then we probably will pick up the other presenters after lunch. I think that's the way it goes. I just would make the point at the start that this is, as we all know, this is we're still in the recovery of the first two floods. So this is really just a kind of stock take of what's happened and what the initial response has been. Obviously, our committee is going to have to pick up these matters in light of the flood events as a part of our work program, and that will be monthly updates. So there will be plenty of opportunity to examine more of the specifics of what has occurred in our response as the year progresses. So thank you. Without any further ado, I hand over to you, Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll keep this as brief as possible to allow plenty of time for questions. So three things we want to cover off this afternoon: the hydrology of the storm event itself, our operational response to date, and the impact on stormwater infrastructure. And that's just a shot from Henderson on the 27th of January. We've got here was it hopefully going to be a simulation of the rain radar event. Can someone just click on that? And that's effectively the rain radar. And you see up the top, that's midday at the moment, coming through to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, through to 10, 11, midnight. Now, what's exceptional about the event is that the intensity of the rainfall was very widespread across the region. Very unusual to have an event of that duration over that a degree of geographic inclusion. What's also interesting about the 27th of January is that the forecasters didn't get this one quite right. So these are two forecasts, one from Windy, one from MetView. The blue line is the predicted rainfall and the yellow is the actual. And the two spikes are the 27th of January and the 1st of February. So unlike Cyclone Gabriel, where the forecasting was incredibly accurate, in this case, the forecasting wasn't accurate, but what I can say is that even on that small blue intensity, the preparedness was on a normal, considered to be a normal heavy rainfall event where there's a whole lot of preparedness work that takes place. So the preparedness work still happened for this event, not knowing what exactly we were walking ourselves into. So from the rain radar, this is the actual the annual rainfall intensity. So the black indicates greater than a 100-year event. And inside that black area, the greater than 100-year event actually is across all durations, whether it's for 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, 6 hour, 12 hours, 24 hours. Just about in all cases within that black area, we exceeded that event. In fact, you'll see there that this is actually the wettest 24 hours in the history of Auckland, and the weather records of Auckland go back to the early 1900s. And not only was it greater, it was greater by some 50% than what was previously considered to be a 100-year rainfall event. This is Cyclone Gabriel. And for Cyclone Gabriel, very similar around the 100-year intensity. But of course, what's happening in Cyclone Gabriel, if you compare to the previous slide, is it's almost the rest of Auckland that missed out on the first event, ironically got hit with the second event. And in terms of Cyclone Gabriel, we had in Piha in a 24-hour period 360 millimetres of rainfall. Say again? 360 millimetres of rainfall in Piha in a 24-hour period, which absolutely made all of our previous estimates redundant, to be quite honest, because it was so far in excess of any previous design prediction. We had gauges in Muriwai that got that. Just moving on to our operational response. This information is a little bit out of date because since the slide pack was prepared, a lot has happened. So I think we're currently running at about 3,500 requests for service. Now, to put that into context, in a typical year, we'll probably see something in the order of 6,000 requests for service. So in about a 3-week period, we've got about 60% of our annual total occurring at the moment. And that, of course, is putting huge demands on the staff who are out there responding to these issues. The good news is that we've actually got out there and just about been able to look at every request for service that has come in. Some can be resolved immediately, but a number require a much more detailed engineering investigation. So as of the moment, we have some 970 engineering investigations that are ongoing. So the sheer scale of the event means that we've had to do a lot of immediate upsizing, if you like, within Healthy Waters from the wider stormwater community to assist in this area. So when we look at our own staff and consultants and contractors who are currently engaged in our response, that number is over 300 full-time equivalents and increasing as I speak. Just like to highlight the fact that we do a lot of work on hotspot inspections for every event where there is bad weather forecast. So we have some 230 assets or locations that are subject to that work. And this is an example at Sunninook, which is one of our recent stormwater projects where we've created a big embayment area to deal with big events. And so this is the cameras that are actually on the Sunninook grill. So you can see what it was like when the event started. And on the right-hand side, you can see where it got to at the peak of the event. But you can see how quickly on the day after, on the 28th of January, the water levels have reduced. But you can also see the good work that the grill did, because just look at the sheer volume of material that's deposited against the grill. And of course, that all happened through the event. We've got no way of knowing how that occurred because it's all hidden by the water. But that's the after effect of that grill. And so I know at the time the community was surprised how large that grill was, but it's certainly done its job. And you can see there that the area's now, pretty much a day or two after the event, that area's back to normal. So that's what can be achieved with good proactive stormwater design. Just like to briefly mention the issue around the AT assets and the catch pits. So there's 115,000 catch pits in Auckland Transport, which Healthy Waters undertakes annual maintenance on those catch pits. The catch pits and the table drains in the rural areas are dealt with directly by Auckland Transport, with the one exception of the western half of Waiheke Island, which Healthy Waters also does. So that's just showing you when a catch pit clearing occurs. It's quite an intrusive operation. We've got to have appropriate safety measures in place. And so one of the things that we've been thinking about for both catch pit cleaning and street sweeping is that, because one of the issues we've got at the moment, you go to do sweeping or clearing in a street and cars are in the way. You can't get to the catchpit because there are cars parked over the catchpits. So one of the future initiatives we want to think about is maybe having a bit like a rubbish bin collection slot where every so many months a street is dedicated for a full clearance where the sweeping and the catchpit clearing is done, and the residents would have to find alternative parking arrangements. That's the sort of thing that we probably need to do. In Japan, they have forklift trucks that come along and lift up all the cars out of the way to do the cesspit clearing, just to show you that it's such a big issue internationally. So moving forward, we really think that the catchpit frequency, annual cleaning is not good enough, and we need to look at the ability for more funding to increase the frequency of that cleaning. Next point I'd like to make is around infrastructure and the fact that when we talk about of our network, a massive part of our network is both ground soakage and natural streams. So if you take ground soakage, it's where we've got the fractured basalt, which provides a pathway for the water to get into the natural groundwaters. The problem is that those areas do not work. When we get to really high intensity rainfall, those areas get absolutely saturated. So there's nowhere for the water to go. We get ingress into the pipe network, and in this case here in King George Ave, Epsom, there's actually been, you can see where the manhole lid is flipped as well. And so that's contributing to, which almost certainly that would be a combination of stormwater and wastewater contamination in that particular circumstance. Another example of high groundwater is what we occurred in a number of our soakage areas. Kingsland, Morningside, around Eaton Park and Onehunga were some of the worst affected areas, and this is a site in Leslie Avenue in Morningside, just showing the extent of the flooding created by the groundwater levels. So it's actually Brewster Avenue, Morningside is that particular shot. And we observed very similar, I could have repeated this many times, of photos from Eden Park and from Onehunga. And the water just can't be pumped down because the hydrostatic pressure from the groundwater will push to the surface faster than the pumps can remove it. So there is no pumping solution under this circumstance. You've just got to let Mother Nature take its path. Mentioned before the natural streams that we're dealing with, 16,000 kilometres of natural streams. Without those streams fully functioning from a hydraulic point of view, the network can't perform efficiently. And a lot of those streams are in private ownership. And so these are just some of the challenges that we've got around stream blockages and the sheer scale of the length of stream, and relying so heavily on public information around what's happening on those streams, because with the best will in the world, we can't get around 16,000 kilometres of streams. So these are just three examples of some of the work the team have been doing, trying to clear blockages from the streams. We've got Sunninook on the left, a big blockage at the Newland culvert in the middle, and the Whangapuri stream, Pukikohi on the right-hand side.
Just to clarify, that went in during the flood.
Oh, sorry, this is all, sorry, I guess I thought it was self-evident. This is all material that arrived unannounced on the 27th of January through overland flow path. So some of the scenes that we've seen, I can assure you, are quite amazing, of portable buildings and the like that have travelled many, many metres to get into our waterways, because the waterways are a natural part of the overland flow path mechanism, is how the city operates. The water starts at the top of the hill, ends up in the sea, and gravity basically takes over. So in terms of the impact on our major projects, I think taking all things into consideration, we were pretty lucky with what happened. So the Ports of Auckland project, we had some flooding at the inlet shaft and some silt deposits and a tomo and an erosion next to the railway line, which, working closely with Wairau, we were able to get on and respond and deal with that issue quite quickly. We had some pretty dramatic activity in Corbyn's Reserve. So that's the site flooded from the Opanuku stream, overtopping its banks. The good news there is that the clean-up costs will be covered by our contract works insurance. Councils just have to pay the 75k excess, but the balance of the costs are covered by insurance. So I think this site actually got hit twice. I think it got hit in the 27th of February event, and then it got hit again on the 1st of February event. And we had a little bit of damage occurred as a consequence of our Clinker Place project as well, but relatively minor in the overall scheme of things. So I think it's interesting when you look at infrastructure from a healthy waters point of view, the focus is very much around the natural damage as opposed to the damage to the pipe network, which has been relatively minor by comparison with Watercare, which we'll hear about in a minute. We have lost a few lines to slips, etc., but not to the same extent as Watercare. And we had a previous example of Sunningnook. Here's just another example of what good design can achieve. So that's our Freeland Reserve project in Mount Roskill. So you can see what it looked like during the evening of the 27th when it's actually doing its job. But within 3 days, on the 31st of January, life in that area had got back to normal. And so that's where if you can get in and be proactive and do good design, you can get great outcomes. But what that does mean is you need land in order to obey stormwater flows. You do need land, which is okay in greenfield and new brownfield development. But you can imagine existing urban communities. Where do you find the land to provide that level of stormwater protection? It requires some big thinking around the future. And without any further ado, I know I've probably gone over my 10 minutes, but it's hard to stick to the timeline when there's so much to share with you. Kia ora, and I'll hand over to Andrew Chin.
Kia ora koutou, ko Andrew Chin, tauku ingoa. Thank you very much. So today I'm representing the Watercare team, and firstly we'd just like to thank the Auckland Council team and the wider group Auckland Transport Waka Kotahi for the collaboration and support, Auckland Emergency Management, because there's been an awful lot of difficult emergency works we've had to get out to, and so very much appreciate the collaborative efforts of the wider council group there. Key message there. This presentation slide deck was prepared before Cyclone Gabrielle hit, so I'll be providing some additional bits of information towards the end about the impacts of Gabrielle on the network. But prior to Gabrielle, we had all of the trunk services up and running. However, there's still a lot of damage in the local networks that we still haven't found and discovered. So this is Scenic Drive, and you can see the broken water main there. This is quite a significant piece of damage, and it really goes to show, as Craig alluded to earlier, a lot more damage on Watercare pipelines due to landslips and erosion. This is the Waitakere number 2 water main. The water main's still in service, but as you can see there, it's very vulnerable. All of the erosion has left it exposed, and so it's sort of the water main's really holding up the road there. The other impact of the slips is the siltation in the dams and the water supplies. You can see the Lanai Tupu there, how dark the water is with the sediment. Now, this has created a number of issues, and in particular, following Gabrielle, it's knocked out some of the water treatment plants. And so I'll talk to those in a bit, but the sedimentation in the dams is a major problem. This is a picture of the Wairau pump station in the North Shore. And you can see on the left there what it looked like during the flood, and on the right, the contractors there installing the replacement pumps. You can see the high tide mark on the wall on the right-hand picture. But also you can see the servicemen down at the bottom of the wet well and how large those pumps are. These are really significant bits of kit, and to get the replacement pumps in, we had to call in a lot of favours, and there was pumps diverted from as far away as Christchurch to get up here at short notice to get the Wairau pump station up and running again before Cyclone Gabrielle. So that just sort of talks to the phasing of our incident response, and I still think, we're we've got services restored to a large extent, but the key message today is the system is still very fragile, and I'll talk to this now in the following slides. So firstly, the Huia water treatment system on the raw water or the untreated supply, that sediment has reduced the capacity of the Huia water treatment plant. We've also lost some key pipelines that supply the treatment plant. So effectively the Huia water treatment plant is down to about 50% of its normal capacity. What does this mean? I'll probably add Cyclone Gabrielle heavily impacted the Waitakere water treatment plant. That is currently out of service because the sediment is so high in the Waitakere treatment plant. So we are now providing water to the wider metropolitan area through to the whole, mostly from the southern catchments by the Ardmore treatment plant, and the Newland pumping station is now a really critical pinch point, and that is backfeeding the water up through the west. So it normally goes, the water from the Waitakeres is going into the North Shore and providing the west. Right now we're operating the network so it's feeding up from the south through that critical Newland pumping station. One thing to note is the turbidity in the Hanuas. Cyclone Gabrielle actually was quite heavy rainfall in the Hanuas, but there was a lot of remediation done following Tempest and improvements to the Ardmore treatment plant, and so things are not looking too bad at Ardmore thanks to the restorations that we've done post the Tasman Tempest. In the local supply, so I've just talked about the bulk transmission supply in the wider network, but in the local area around Titirangi, South Titirangi, that slip-on scenic drive, that water main's out from the Ngaitupu Reservoir provider that supplies water to the South Titirangi and the Konini water supply zones. So now we've reconfigured the network so it's been back supplied from the Titirangi zone, and now a new alternative supply coming in from the Pleasant Point pump station is back feeding those zones. So so that was just completed yesterday. So the water supply is back to, up and full functioning in that area. But what you don't see there is that now the Waitakere water treatment plant is currently out of service. So just a quick update on some of the impacts of Cyclone Gabrielle. Murawai water treatment plant has been red stickered. The slip has severely impacted that, and so the communities there are being supplied by water tanker, which they'll have to go down to and get containers to fill up a water tanker at Murawai. That's a major, and it's unclear about how long it will take to re-establish alternative water supply to the Murawai community. I've mentioned the turbidity issues in the Waitakere water treatment plant, so that's currently offline. In Helensville, also high turbidity levels. At the moment, we are filling up the transmission reservoir with water tankers, so there's a fleet of water tankers going round the clock, topping up the reservoir in Helensville. Likewise in Wellsford, we have got turbidity issues, and one of the issues in Wellsford was the roads through Dome Valley were blocked off, so we couldn't get people up there to inspect, to maintain. So Wellsford's also currently out of service, but we're thinking we can get Wellsford back up a little bit quicker. For those particular communities, we've put the call out for them to conserve their water use as much as possible. But as you can see from the wider water network, we've lost a lot of redundancy. So at the moment, we've got, the production is meeting the amount of demand, but we're keeping a very close eye on it, and we probably look to make the call to get Aucklanders to use water wisely, just as a precaution that we don't want a sudden spike in demand to really sort of take a little bit of that safety margin out of the system. So on the wastewater side of things, there has been a lot of damage to wastewater networks. So the big trunk infrastructure is back up and running. But as I said earlier, there is an awful lot of, in the small gullies and the back of people sections, there's a lot of damage that we do not know about at the moment. So we encourage the community to notify Watercare if they see that damage through the Watercare websites and the chatbot in the call centre. That's the best way for us to track and record and monitor the progress of those repairs and damages. But there will be still quite some time before we discover all of the issues in the local network. The good news is the trunk infrastructure is up in place. And this is sort of just a little bit of an outline of the recovery process that we're working to at the moment. So if there's any partai for Craig and I, happy to receive it now.
Okay, so thank you, Andrew. They were two outstanding presentations in terms of the visuals that are used there, so and the challenges that we now face. So thanks very much for that, and also really good to see the cooperation between the Council, Healthy Waters and Watercare. Andrew, of course, seconded to Watercare, so that's really good to see that cooperation on the ground, particularly in emergency events like that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the plan is to have lunch very shortly, as soon as possible. We've got a lot of information there. We will be revisiting large chunks of this for the remainder of the year now in more detail. So if we could just keep the questions, please, to just matters of clarification, because you know, we've all probably got things we'd like to examine in terms of what we've experienced ourselves, but they will be getting picked up. Okay, so we have Councillor Newman and Councillor Turner. Councillor Newman.
I've got a pile of questions which I will not give to you today, but I do have one. Your ability at this stage to be able to remove trees in the road corridor that are compromising the resilience of your drains as you have identified through clearance to date. How are you going with that?
Yeah, so we're continuing to do clearance work within the natural waterways on a priority basis. Yeah, we've only got obviously so much resource we can throw at it, but we're doing all we can, and that's on an ongoing basis. Councillor Newman.
I might just follow up in particular around the table drains on the Mill Road corridor. AT have graciously sort of allowed us to use emergency provisions for traffic management to get up and clear out those critical drains as a matter of urgency.
Are you able to provide some advice as to the rule changes you require from Auckland Council in order to be able to effectively remove trees that are where the roots are compromising your drain network?
That's quite a complex question. It's not so much just in district, it's not so much in the unitary plan rules. We have provisions in this to private land in and around those blocks. Well, in the road corridor, I'm not aware of any major impediments under the planning rules for us to do maintenance in the road corridor. The issues in the space of Mill Road and such a busy road, it's obtaining a corridor access request to undertake that work safety with the adequate levels of traffic management. So the issue there is around undertaking that kind of work on such a busy road with the right kind of traffic management in place. Okay,
so thank you. And we, Councillor Turner, who's looks like he's up inspecting those dams in the Waitakere as we speak. Wairau, Councillor Turner.
Thank you. My question is relating to Healthy Water and Auckland Transport's working relationship, maybe the cost, the liability relationship. You know, just for context, you know, the roads are a labyrinth of networks which interfere with overland flow paths. They redirect all the water into certain places. I noted when you put your pictures up about cleaning cesspits, it's all the to clean, who's responsible for the exit pipes of those cesspits, which usually cross the road to the lower side, and to my observation and that of the public's, are not being cleaned out? Where does the inter-reaction between the departments lie, and how can we make that more efficient? Thank you.
So the cesspit is an Auckland Transport asset, as well as what we call the catchpit lead, that first pipe from the cesspit to the manhole. From there downstream, they become Auckland Council / Healthy Waters assets. Healthy Waters works with Auckland Transport cleaning out the sumps of the cesspits. So we have the contract to run the sucker trucks that clean out the sediment in the cesspits. The grating and the grill, that is cleaned through street sweeping, which is managed by Auckland Transport. So cesspit lead, asset renewal and replacement, Auckland Transport. Downstream of that, Healthy Waters. Cleaning out the sediment from the sumps, Healthy Waters. Clearing the grate, Auckland Transport.
Thank you, and there lies the problem.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Turner. So we've just going to finish up with a quick Hills and finally Councillor Lee. Thanks,
Chair. Thank you. This has been really helpful, I think, particularly for those of us who weren't able to get out and inspect what was going on for ourselves. Some of these pictures are really quite devastating. The query I have is really in regard to the issue that you raised, Craig, around the catch pits, and I might get the lingo wrong here, sorry. I see that work that we can do strategically about some of those waste streams that are effectively up in there. I saw a tyre that someone must have actually lifted the grate up and put the tyre into the pit. Luckily, I logged that about 2 years ago and it got fixed. But, you know, some people have been quite imaginative in some of the things they're putting into these pits. How can we work through the waste avenue to act on that?
I think you're raising a really critical point around wider community education. We have to work with our communities around the whole way that we live our lives and take personal responsibility. And one of the things that I'm really keen to look at going forward is around all of our waterways, is how effectively we create a community ownership model for every waterway in Auckland. So we can start to get that immediate connectivity back so that we can work far more closely with our communities in the space. Kia ora.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Just quickly thank both of you and your organisations and all the teams. Just phenomenal work that first week. Frank Tian and Ben Halliwell, others were on the phone to me, weekends, nights, all sorts of different times. I think we had 1,000 requests on North Auckland alone in that first week. It was horrendous, and they were working under some of the worst conditions I've seen, you know, snapped pipes, sewage everywhere, down cliffs, slips, and trying to help people all at the same time. So thank you. Just on the more general discussion around, you know, there's a lot of blame or assumption around what can happen. You know, our stormwater systems are built for 1 in 10 year, and obviously 1 in 100 year would probably be 10 times the price, I guess. But I've had some discussions with you guys around the wall of water we saw on the shore, especially. What would it take to have prevented that sort of, I mean, it was like a tsunami coming from the inland going out. Was there any way, or could you foresee how that could have reduced devastation? What would it take? I'm just trying to understand from your professional views.
So in the Wairau Valley in particular, we wouldn't be able to build a pipe big enough to convey that away without seeing any water on the surface. The Wairau Valley already has a concrete line channel which has got no vegetation in it whatsoever. So it's not so much trying to build a flood defence and convey that amount of water away. It's trying to adapt the land use to be resilient to having that kind of water on occasion.
So is that, in your opinions, or is it more about trying to reduce severity rather than telling people we could stop what happened, you know, when you're getting 8 times the monthly amount in 3 hours?
Feasible. We couldn't stop that amount of water or contain it in constructed assets in an economically feasible way.
Okay, thank you. And I can back that up from my expertise. My fifth form geography project at Westlake Boys on the Wairau stream would concluded the same. Final question from Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Just to recap on the response to Councillor Turner, the issue of street catch pits is more complicated than it would appear a la Super City. In other words, is it right to say that the catch pits are in effect owned by Auckland Transport on behalf of the city, and also the exit pipe downstream, and the rest of downstream network and upstream is the responsibility of Healthy Waters. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I might just elaborate on why that is the case. So when the original Super City set up those boundaries, the maintenance of catch pits and the catch pit leads is able to be part funded from fuel taxes and road user charges by way of the funding assistance rate. So by clearly demarcating that the catch pit and the catch pit lead are part of the road asset, it allows funding assistance from central government to fund the maintenance and renewal of those assets, and they are technically part of the road structure. So hence that's part of the rationale of why the split.
Oh, really? Okay. In terms of responsibility for cleaning those catch pits, is it the responsibility of the owner of the catch pits, namely Auckland Transport, to ensure those catch pits are regularly cleaned, or is it the responsibility of the council?
So Auckland Transport funds Healthy Waters to clean out the sumps. And so by way of contract, Healthy Waters is responsible for cleaning out the sumps of the catch pits.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you. Mr. McElroy and I have quite a long email archive back in the day regarding catch pits, but they're back in focus again. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we adjourn for lunch, Councillor Stewart, do you want to have your question now?
Just thank you, Craig. You'll remember I'm sure you will remember the question. We've had a lot to do with some of the streams, private streams out in Howick, and Matthew Brockovich, who's an expert in that field, has actually had a lot of meetings with you. But what I want to just say, you do realise that the reason why that we didn't get the flooding in the Howick catchment, we didn't have that big concentration of rain, so we don't want you to think that it's not going to happen in Howick again, because it will. If you remember 2018, the pontoons were taken out in Half Moon Bay, and probably we were the place that got really trashed. And so it does happen everywhere. It just depends on where the concentration of rain is. We didn't get it this time, but I just don't want you to forget that Howick and out east, we also get it.
You could have been worse. I can categorically assure you, Councillor Stewart, that our planning is looking at all areas of the region and treating them all equitably. You're right, this event could hit anywhere in the future, but what we can say with confidence is the sizing of the events has changed so much. So our standards are going to have to change, because what we said was a 1 in 100 year event last year isn't a 100-year event anymore. Kia ora.
I just want to also say, healthy waters in my community have been absolutely amazing. So I'm very impressed with what they've been doing. They have got a big challenge ahead of them.
Right, thank you, Councillor Stewart. Look, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to adjourn for lunch now. Thank you, Craig and Andrew, for those presentations and explanations and the foreshadowing of the challenges that lie ahead for us now. So we're going to break just for 25 minutes, if that's okay, folks. I don't want to get in trouble with the Councillors' Union, but we need to catch up a little bit of time. So we will reconvene the meeting just after 1:30, where we'll continue this presentation on the storm events. Thank you.
Kia ora.